Welcome back to Touchdown Talks. This video is long overdue. It's been a while since I've made a longer form video on the channel. Also, been a minute since I've made any actual video here on YouTube for you. Of course, if you've been following Touchdown Talks on Instagram or on X, formerly known as Twitter, do post things on there pretty regularly. Anytime there's news that comes out, generally share those to stories and things like that and give quick thoughts there, as well as shorts videos. Of course, anytime I make shorts videos, those are on YouTube as well. But this video is going to be a bit of a longer form video. Probably going to post, if that's too much for you, if you're not into watching big videos, not to worry. My plan is to, in the coming days, I will post the segments of this video for each individual topic that I'm going to cover. I'll post those individually in the coming days. So, if for whatever reason you don't want to go through listening to the whole thing, I'll also have timestamps down below so you can skip around to whatever you're interested in, of course. But if for whatever reason you'd rather shorter videos, I'll have those coming out in the coming days as well, taken from this overall video. But just to kind of give you a rundown of what I'm going to discuss today, really going to just go over a few of the top NFL news topics currently and things that have gone on either very recently or things to look ahead to as we are towards the end of March. It's March 25th as of the day that I'm recording this. So Wednesday, we're just a month away from the NFL draft. We're a week away, less than, from the NFL annual owners meeting that they'll be having in Florida this upcoming week. So there's plenty to talk about, but the rundown for today is, first, we're going to talk some Puka Nacua. And then second of all, we'll move over and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Maxx Crosby trade that failed and go into a little of that. And then third, we will be going over, I'll just visit some thoughts on the Chicago Bears offseason so far. Not going to spend a ton of time on that, but being that I am a Chicago Bears fan, I know a decent amount of you who have subscribed so far are Bears fans or have subscribed to me because of some of the Bears content and coverage that I've given. Love the NFL overall, but of course, as a Chicago Bears fan, that is the team that I am the most tapped into of any of the 32. So I will quickly touch on sort of my thoughts so far for what GM Ryan Poles and the Bears have done. And then fourth, we'll take a look at, just mention a couple news items for the NFL schedule that came out today. And then finally, I want to wrap up with talking about the some NFL officiating news, and then we'll jump from there, kind of segue between that into talking about the NFL annual owners meeting that's coming up in the next few days, and some of the things that the owners and committees, coaches and such, things that they're going to be discussing that could impact the game this season or in future seasons to come. But first, let's go now into the Puka Nacua situation. So, if you're not aware, there's been a bit of controversy around Puka Nacua as of late. A bit unfortunate for him, being that right now he's at a stage in his career where he is in negotiations for a next contract. It's the time for that. And obviously Puka Nacua, he's been a great receiver in the NFL. He's contributed a lot as a fifth round draft pick for the Rams. Has come in. He's played really well multiple seasons. He's had some injuries, sure, but for the most part, he's been one of the best receivers in the league since he got into the league. And up until the last few months, he's honestly been pretty clean off the field as far as any kind of controversies or anything like that. Didn't really have much of that, but unfortunately, starting in December of this past year, 2025, there was a bit of an incident where Puka Nacua was on a live stream with a couple popular YouTube live streamers, including Aiden Ross and another. But those two ended up, they did this live stream with Puka Nacua that I believe was actually done at the Rams facility. It wasn't, nothing official from the Rams, but it was, somehow they got access into the facility with Puka Nacua and did this live stream there, I believe, if I remember right. But the controversy there, early mid-December, was that they convinced Puka Nacua to do a hand gesture that can be seen as anti-Semitic. After that incident, Puka Nacua had come out and apologized and had said that he hadn't been aware of what the gesture meant. In the context of the stream, they had been showing him this gesture and saying that he should do it as a touchdown celebration. That following week, he actually did score a touchdown in the game. Didn't end up doing that celebration, likely because he had been advised by that point not to do it during the game. So that part was good, but still, nonetheless, obviously that regardless of his apology, obviously that's not going to be enough for some people. I'm not passing judgment on whether that's good enough or not. Still did it on the live stream. Whether he knew what it meant or not, it was dumb. Mike Florio, who works for NBC, owns Pro Football Talk, he's talked a bit about this. The thing he's said that he would advise NFL players to keep in mind is anytime you're involved with these, popular streamers or whatever, that are doing stuff with you live that they're going to be posting to their channels, just know you have everything to lose and they have nothing to lose, everything to gain by causing some kind of controversy involving you. It is in all of that content creator's benefit to, goad you into doing something dumb. Because although it could hurt you, it could hurt your reputation, both publicly and with teams, hurt your ability to actually make money and have success in the league and afterwards. But for that content creator, that just that just gives them more clicks. Controversy drives attention. So, for NFL players, if you're going to, whether that's media or content creators that are more independent types, that's part of why players do have to be careful is, content creators and stuff, unfortunately have too much incentive to try to goad players into doing stuff that they shouldn't. Not saying that that's everybody. Obviously I'm doing this on YouTube. Not everybody that's in the media or everybody that's a YouTuber is bad or trying to, trick people into saying something they shouldn't or doing something they shouldn't. But for an NFL player, again, you should be careful about that. So anyways, that incident, middle of December, happens. Puka Nacua apologizes. As far as anybody in the public knew, we move on from there. But just came out yesterday, here again, late March now, and as we're in the off season, talks between Puka Nacua's camp and the Ravens have likely been happening about discussing a new contract. Which that's the other thing too, is with his performance, Puka Nacua is likely looking for a near top of the market deal, or at least wanting that. But the news that came out today, per TMZ, the LA Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua is now facing allegations from a woman saying that Puka Nacua bit her multiple times. Puka Nacua's lawyer spoke with TMZ and gave them a statement, and the lawyer didn't exactly deny the allegation of the bites. So per TMZ, Puka Nacua is accused of, well, TMZ is first reporting that this woman, unnamed woman, is filing a request for a temporary restraining order against Puka Nacua, and this is as a result of an incident that supposedly happened December 31st. So, New Year's Eve night, it sounds like. And allegedly what happened was this woman and Puka Nacua were spending the evening together, whatever. And at some point during the night, she alleges that he made some anti-Semitic remarks, and said things like "F the Jews," whatever. I don't know the exact quotes that he allegedly said. And again, these are all just things that are in this legal filing. But again, this woman alleges that he said some anti-Semitic things towards the beginning of the evening of their time together, and that as the night went on, he got a little bit too rambunctious, a little bit too, too vulgar, rude, threatening, violent, that sort of things. And allegedly, things escalated to the point where he ended up biting her on the thumb and biting her on like the back of the shoulder, like kind of like shoulder blade. And the legal filing included a picture, and it shows basically it's like a bite mark, full circle of teeth on skin. So, and again, allegedly bit her twice, once on the thumb, once on it says shoulder, but again, based off the picture, it looks like it's got to be like back shoulder blade type of area. But supposedly enough to break skin. And then, part of the night also saying some anti-Semitic things. So those are all the things that are included in the allegations for this restraining order this woman has filed for. Puka Nacua's lawyer has come out and again didn't necessarily deny the allegations of the biting. Their response has been that the biting was just horseplay and that kind of stuff, that maybe got out of hand. But they are vehemently denying Puka Nacua saying any kind of anti-Semitic remarks. So they're denying the anti-Semitic stuff, but not completely denying the bite stuff. But regardless, though, they are fighting against the entirety of the allegations. According to reports, the filing for that, the request for the restraining order currently has been denied, but there is another hearing that's scheduled for April 14th. So as far as the legal proceedings go, we'll have to see what happens and what ends up being found out. I'm, personally, I am very much of a believer of innocent until proven guilty, but, sometimes that can be a bit difficult to really, get to the point of proof. But regardless, as far as the legal stuff goes and judging Puka Nacua too much off the field, personally, I'm interested to see what the legal proceedings are and what ends up being found out there. I'll let those proceedings go on before I make any final judgments or anything like that. But regardless, the reason this matters football-wise for Puka Nacua is, again, he's at a stage where they're trying to negotiate for a new contract and likely for a near top-of-the-line market deal. Obviously, for Puka Nacua and his camp, they'd like that to be top of the market, which, by the way, thanks to another recent wide receiver signing, just in the last couple days, the reigning Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, they actually did re-sign their wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, star wide receiver. They signed him to a new wide receiver deal, which put him to the top of the wide receiver market, highest paid NFL wide receiver in history. His current number is at $42.4 million per year. So that's his yearly average. Which, a little side note on that, if you look at the list now of the top 10 paid wide receivers by average that they're making per year. The list goes Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then again, all these other deals were ones that were signed, pre-2025 season. 2 is Jamar Chase, then it's Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Brandon Ayuk with the 49ers. I just, with that top 10 list, you've got the Bengals, the Vikings, the Cowboys, Steelers, Jets, Commanders, Eagles, Lions, 49ers. The one point I want to make on this, that maybe I'll get into in a future video, addressing, especially scheduling videos and more predictive videos for 2026. I don't expect the Seahawks to be near as good as they were in 2025. I do think they'll be competitive, and I do think they have a chance of being a playoff team and competing for that. But, they've got a really difficult division in the NFC West. They've lost some key pieces, including Kenneth Walker. And they just, first of all, it's already hard enough to repeat from winning a Super Bowl as it is. And there's always the Super Bowl hangover. Often I feel like the Super Bowl hangover actually affects the losing team more than the winning team. But regardless, it's tough to get to or even win a Super Bowl and then get back there again. It's very tough. We have seen it. We've seen the Chiefs do it. We've seen the Patriots do it. It's happened, but it's very tough to do it. Very few teams accomplish that. And certainly getting back and winning back-to-back, that's very difficult. And for the Seahawks, based off of this highest paid wide receivers list, I just don't, even just based off of this, I just don't see the Seahawks ending up being that good this year because it's just, you want to have a really good wide receiver, and especially as fans, we get excited for, you get excited when your team signs a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson to a big contract. That's cool. But if you really look at this list of the top 10 teams with highest paid wide, the top 10 highest paid wide receivers, and you look at their 10 teams, you got Bengals missed the playoffs, Vikings missed the playoffs, CeeDee Lamb missed the playoffs, DK Metcalf made the playoffs, first round exit, Garrett Wilson missed the playoffs, Terry McLaurin missed the playoffs, A.J. Brown, the Eagles, made the playoffs, Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl just last year. So again, that's, the Seahawks could very well do something similar to the Eagles this year. But, got to the playoffs, fizzled out, certainly weren't as good this year as they were the previous year. Number 9, A.J. Brown and the Lions missed the playoffs. And then number 10, Brandon Ayuk, bit of an odd situation, but still 49ers missed the playoffs. And also Brandon Ayuk, not even a 49er now, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But, point is, being on the list of top 10 highest, having a top 10, being a team that is on the list of having one of the top 10 highest paid wide receivers, not necessarily a good thing. So, again, you want star wide receivers. Yes, you want a number 1 wide receiver, but having a top 10 wide receiver or top wide receiver in the league, not necessarily going to equate to wins. But anyways, I want to now move on to the second topic, that being the Maxx Crosby trade, or the failure of the would-be trade. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up, obviously this was a couple weeks ago that this happened, but if you weren't familiar, or you haven't been paying attention to NFL offseason news too much, of course, when we came into the offseason, it was pretty clear when the regular season ended, things kind of fell apart between the Raiders and Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby was dealing with an injury towards the end of the season. We know he actually it's been pretty well documented and talked about now, but was playing through a torn meniscus, I believe, if I'm remembering right, for a few weeks towards the end of the season. And reportedly, Maxx Crosby was fighting through that for quite a while. And I believe it was in the last 2 or so weeks of the season, the Raiders decided to shut him down for the season and say, hey, we're going to bench you. We want to, the thought process being, hey, we want to start your offseason sooner, get you rehabbing. We don't want you getting extra hurt on an already lost season. This is obviously lost season for us. Like, you're way too valuable to this team. We want to sit you so that we can, protect you for going forward for us. Again, that rubbed Crosby the wrong way, which I do respect. He's a football player that loves football, wants to fight through it. Again, he had been playing through this same injury for already a few weeks, and that's part of what he's openly talked about. Part of what frustrated him was that they allowed him to play through it for a while and fight through it. But once the team, once the front office fully had given up on trying to win anything, basically trying to tank, they wanted to shut him down. But Crosby's not interested in that. Still wants to be out there fighting first guys, getting sacks, that kind of thing, and playing the game. So it rubbed him the wrong way. And so going into January, Maxx Crosby made it pretty well known that he wanted a trade. And when as we started going through the offseason, at first the messaging from the Raiders was that they didn't want to trade Crosby. They weren't gonna do it. They weren't gonna listen to offers. But then, of course, as we got closer to February, got closer to the combine, word started coming out that, okay, sure, since Crosby seems that insistent that he's done being a Raider, he's tired of not happy with how things ended in 2025, he wants out. Okay, fine, we'll start listening to offers. So then, reports were that the Raiders, of course, started getting tons of interest from around the league. Some of those teams being the Ravens, the Cowboys, the Bears, and some others. But those are the top 3 teams that got talked about the most around NFL circles as being interested, and also just fan speculation for where Crosby could go. And so, of course, at the Combine, it's no secret, NFL agents and GMs, coaches, they get together at the Combine. Half of the reason for the Combine these days is to negotiate contracts and trades for players that are already in the league. The Combine's great and all. Obviously, it does still have somewhat of a purpose for scouting draft prospects, but honestly, these days, a lot of the times, especially for the top prospects, a lot of them don't even participate in most of the stuff at the Combine. That there's the physicals that are important. That's still there. There's the interviews, but a lot of players come into the league now so coached up for the interviews that happen at the Combine that those almost don't matter. And then, as far as the on-field stuff, a lot of guys don't participate in that stuff, and they maybe just do their pro day with their school, which, a lot of times those pro days even are kind of, geared towards making that player look good. And so, anyways, the not-so-secret side purpose of the Combine is that it's there for, top people in the league and agents to get together and start negotiating deals even before it's technically legal to be negotiating deals. And so at the Combine, deals started going, and then March 5th on a Friday, March 6th on a Friday, it was announced that the Raiders and the Ravens had agreed to a trade that would send Maxx Crosby to the Ravens in exchange for the for first round pick this year, which I believe was going to be the 20th overall pick, and then first round pick in 2027. So it was 2 first round picks this year, next year, and then the Ravens would get Maxx Crosby. So that was the announced deal. Now that was Friday of March 6th. And for context on the NFL season schedule and timeline, March 9th on Monday started what is called sort of the NFL negotiating window. This is the period. It's a 2-day window from a certain time on Monday, basically Monday morning, until 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. That 2-day-ish period is known as the legal negotiating window, where teams can start negotiating with free agents and things like that. And then official contracts and deals, so this can include trades, those aren't able to be made official until the beginning of the NFL new league year. So this year, the NFL new year was on Wednesday, March 11th. So at that moment, once the NFL league year starts, then you can make free agency deals that have been announced. And, first of all, that's when free agency officially starts, is at the beginning of the new year. So Wednesday afternoon, that's when NFL free agency officially starts. However, the way this NFL negotiating period, this legal negotiating period works, it's kind of weird. Because again, the idea behind it is that, okay, you give 2 days for teams and for agents to coordinate, figure things out, so that then by the time free agency starts, people can start signing and it's not frantic. But really all it does is instead, the franticness just ends up being at the beginning of the negotiating window, and that's when, even before things become official, that's when things start getting leaked or really just reported out to the different insiders, Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissero, all those. Monday is when the frenzy of free agency starts happening of, this team has signed this player and this team has signed this player. When those announcements get put out, by ESPN or whatever, and you see those headlines, that's not necessarily that signing is official yet. That's just an announcement of, hey, this is the deal that the team and this falling player have agreed to. It's not in writing yet. It's not official, but this is what they're planning on agreeing to. And that's pending, with all trades and free agency acquisitions. There is, of course, a physical involved that's generally a given to need to be passed before a deal gets made. But again, these deals can't be made official until free agency and the new NFL league year actually starts. So it's a little weird and kind of deceptive the way the media and some of these insiders report some of these things. It makes it sound like these deals are permanent, or it makes it sound like these deals are official already when they're not. Now, yes, for the most part, these deals, when they get announced, if they get announced, it's because it's pretty likely it's going to go through. But as we saw with Maxx Crosby, that was not the case with this trade. So what ended up happening, again, the trade was announced Friday, March 6th, before the negotiating window. That's fine because this is a trade. But so again, this deal gets announced by the media and by the two teams on March 6th, on Friday. And then Monday rolls around. That's the beginning of the negotiating window. I believe it's on Monday. Maxx Crosby was in Baltimore at the facilities, taking care of the physical, that kind of stuff. Was in Baltimore Monday and Tuesday. And then it comes out Tuesday afternoon. It's announced by the Raiders by a statement that they posted on social media where they just said, the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of our trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. We have no further comment at this time. And I made a shorts video on it, but it was pretty just abrupt. It very much gave off the vibe that, okay, obviously something went down here. Does not sound like the Raiders are happy with whatever went down here. It ended up being reported that, of course, it did come down to the physical. Maxx Crosby did fail the physical for this knee and for this meniscus repair that he's going through. And at first the controversy was, okay, well, what the heck is going on? Like, everyone knew, it was pretty well reported that Crosby underwent surgery at the beginning, towards the end of 2025. That was the whole reason there was drama with the Raiders in the first place, was because they made him sit, didn't play him those last weeks, and had him start the surgery and the recovery process a little early. So that was pretty common knowledge that he had that surgery, and so also should be pretty common knowledge that he was going to be going through rehab and that sort of thing this offseason, with the goal of coming back early in 2026. So it was like, all right, that shouldn't be a surprise. What's going on here? There was also reports that people around the league, other GMs and stuff like that, were kind of confused, kind of surprised that the Ravens would have agreed to this deal and then backed out. But the reasoning that the Ravens have since explained was that it was indeed due to the physical, and it's not so much that they didn't know that he had, issues with his knee, but the findings that they got and the things that stuck out to them with the examination of his knee is they have concerns more so about the long-term ramifications of his knee, and they worry that Maxx Crosby is going to be dealing with a degenerative knee, and so giving up 2 first-round picks, one this year, one next year. You've got a new head coach. You've already got a Lamar Jackson, veteran quarterback, who's negotiating for another contract. Obviously, if you were going to bring in Crosby, quite possible he would have wanted a new contract, a slightly restructured contract. And so to give up 2 first-round picks for that within the next couple years, those 2 first-round draft picks, I mean, the draft is a gamble, of course, but first-round picks, those are players that you expect to be starters at the very least. And obviously, we have busts every year, but 2 first-round draft picks, the chances that at least one of those players comes in and, signs a 4-year deal, a 5-year deal, and plays out at least that 4 or 5 years for the Ravens and does decently well. 1 out of those 2 draft picks hitting and being a 4 or 5 year thing for the Ravens, which that's long term for the NFL. That's just too high of a possibility, and especially also that again, you get these rookies for cheap. That's a lot to give up for Maxx Crosby if you are indeed concerned about his long term ability to play. Crosby's not old by NFL standards, but he's definitely at the age where he's not a young player anymore. He's not a new player or anything. So I don't totally blame the Ravens for changing their mind there. I do still think it's a little weird. Again, there's a reason that these insiders and that all the media covering the NFL so confidently is able to announce these deals during the negotiating window before they've actually been made official when free agency actually starts, is because 99% of the time, especially with the big name trades and free agent deals, generally if those get, generally if the teams give that information to the insiders and say, go ahead and post this, most of the time that's going through, it's going to work out. Again, like large majority of the time, it's going to work out. It rarely doesn't. This was just one of the cases, and with a blockbuster trade where it did not end up working out. So since then, after the trade fell through, at first there was some reporting, around that same week, there was kind of some conflicting reporting. Some insiders were reporting that the Raiders were once again getting tons of offers, and then there was some reporting that was saying that they weren't getting near the same level of interest as they had been before the Ravens deal was a thing. So, because again, before the Raiders and Ravens deal was announced, it was discussed that the Cowboys were interested, the Bears were interested. Again, there was 2 or 3, 4 other teams that were reported to be pretty interested in trying to go for Crosby. But again, the thing is the Raiders were asking pretty much demanding a minimum price of 2 first-round picks, and it sounds like the Ravens were really the only team that were at first willing to go with that idea. And it is quite possible that over the process of going through that, they also did land Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals, and for a minute there was some speculation of, wait a minute, and that was another reason why some people were a little suspicious of the Ravens backing out of this. Wait a minute, are they just using the meniscus as an excuse? Did they just get Trey Hendrickson and they decided now they're good on, at pass rusher, big veteran pass rusher? Did they just decide that they're good and they got cold feet about the 2 first-round picks, and so now they're using the knee as an excuse? But at least according to the general manager for the Ravens, they were genuinely trying to actually get Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson. So, and he did genuinely, if you watched the press conferences and stuff when he talked about it, did sound genuinely bummed that they didn't land Maxx Crosby and that they weren't able to work that out. But yeah, it was just interesting. But again, as far as whether or not there was actually much efforts after this trade fell out, whether or not there were actually any real efforts by other teams to reach back out to the Raiders, I'm not 100% sure on the truth of that. But regardless, nothing's come about of it. And really in the last week or so, the reporting has kind of switched to, sounds like, after the whole experience for Crosby, he's kind of softened again on the idea of, okay, I'm down to stay being a Raider. Maybe I don't want to get traded that bad after my experience of, the whiplash of, he had a post thanking Raider Nation, saying, let's go Ravens, that kind of thing. He went to Baltimore, thought he was going to be a Raven for a second, and then, nope, sorry, you're a Raider again. So from there, it sounds like, Crosby's talked about, at least for him mentally, he's kind of back to, hey, I'm a Raider. I want to stay a Raider. Let's go. I'm focusing on my rehab. This is what I want to do. And again, for the Raiders, they didn't even necessarily really on their end really want to trade Crosby in the first place. They more so were just doing it because they, sort of out of a necessity because of Crosby demanding it, and because, if you could get the right price, then you take it. But, it sounds like most likely Crosby is going to be staying with the Raiders going into 2026, which certainly could be good for them. However, as a result of all this, again, not much concrete is out there as far as what all the other teams were actually offering. Again, the Raiders were demanding 2 first-round picks, which was a price that sounds like it was, felt pretty high for most teams, so much so that a lot just backed out. But from that price. But one of the team that was reportedly, probably second behind the Ravens was the Cowboys as far as being interested in Maxx Crosby. And we do actually have the details on 3 trade offers that they made to the Raiders for Maxx Crosby that obviously didn't go through. So the first offer they made was, one of the offers they made was 2026 20th overall pick and defensive tackle Osa Odigizua. And then the second would have been the 2026 12th overall pick and a 2027 third round pick. And then the final offer was going to be and again, I say final, but just the last of the 3 I'm bringing up. I don't know necessarily the order that they brought up these offers or anything like that, but these were just 3 offers that the Cowboys have, openly said they offered to the Raiders. The final one being 2026 20th overall pick and a 2027 second round pick. So again, with 2026, the Cowboys do have 2 first round picks, the 12th and the 20th overall. So again, they kind of, between those 3 deals, kind of switched off between those, and then it was a 2027 second or third round pick, or Osa Odigizua, basically valuing him as a second, third round pick level player, which feels fair enough. But yeah, so those were the 3 offers that the Cowboys made. Obviously makes sense why, Ravens actually did come to the table with the price that the Raiders had asked for, 2 first round picks. So that's why the Raiders tried to go with the Ravens deal for those 2 first round picks. But I don't know how much the Cowboys tried again with those same offers after the Raiders thing. I don't know for sure on that, but regardless, it's not happened. I don't really see at this point Maxx Crosby getting traded. A lot of those teams now have kind of pivoted in other directions now, at least as far as reported plans. So I don't see. I think we'll see Maxx Crosby on the Raiders again in 2025, which will be good for the Raiders. The Raiders already, even without those 2 first-round picks, they've got a lot of draft capital this year, coming years. They've got a lot of draft capital that, decent amount of cap space as well. A lot of needs, of course. One of the worst teams in the league in the last few years. One of the most playoff-starved teams in the league and in American sports, really. They've been in the wilderness for a while, so they've got a lot of needs, but the obvious one is that the Raiders are going to draft Mendoza with the first overall pick. I don't think it's, some media personalities are debating that, about whether or not Mendoza should be picked first overall. You can have whatever opinion you want of Mendoza versus Simpson for who's the number 1 quarterback in this draft, but say whatever you want. It's going to be Mendoza that gets drafted first overall in this draft, and it's going to be the Raiders that draft him. So, for the Raiders, you got a new head coach. You're going to have Mendoza. You're going to have, you got Ashton Genty back there at running back, who, did have a disappointing 2025 season, but part of that was having a really disappointing offensive line in 2025. So, that's an area, if you can improve that offensive line, get good young quarterback play out of Mendoza, get Ashton Genty going, keep Maxx Crosby as a top of the line pass rusher and a veteran presence on the defense. The Raiders could certainly be improved, which that's not a very high standard to be improved from where they have been. But keeping Crosby makes sense for the Raiders to want to do that. They've already got a good amount of draft capital. They don't necessarily need a ton more picks. All right, moving on to the third topic I wanted to quickly touch on. Not going to go into super in depth on this today. That is the Chicago Bears offseason. So I'll put up. So going over the list, I'll have a tweet on screen that shows sort of the list of the players that the Bears have added and lost. I don't want to go through reading every single one for you. That'll take us too long. But really so far through free agency, I know there are some Bears fans that are a bit disappointed, feel a little bit down on how things have transpired so far this offseason for the Bears. Some of it not even to their fault. That partially being because included in the changes for the Bears is a key veteran retiring. That being center Drew Dahlman, who announced, I believe it was right before free agency started. He announced that he had decided he's gonna retire from the NFL. So, and he was a huge deal for the Bears in 2025. They had just traded for him last year, traded with the Falcons to get him in, signed him to a 3-year deal, and Dahlman played every single game for the Bears, including in the playoffs. Played basically every offensive snap. I'm not even sure if he missed a single one. I know he played and started every single game for the Bears. And obviously that was a huge deal for Caleb Williams. Experienced, very talented. I think 14-year NFL veteran center who could help take care of making sure the line was good, making sure that they knew what they were doing. Having a veteran center that knows what they're doing, that's a huge deal for quarterbacks. I mean, offensive lines in general, very underrated in football, and in the NFL, offensive lines don't get enough credit, but centers for sure. And I think the offensive lines have been getting a little bit more credit and recognition in recent years, thanks to personalities like Jason Kelce, names like that who was a center, Hall of Fame level center that, people know who he is. Some of that I feel like has helped a little bit, but still, I don't think most fans understand how important an offensive line really is. Football really is won and lost in the trenches for offense and defense, and especially on offense. If you're your quarterback, especially if you got a young quarterback, quarterbacks have so much that they have to deal with, both physically and mentally, that they have to do in order to play good. And be the on-field general. And so especially for a young quarterback that's in the NFL, and the NFL game is just a totally different speed than college and high school. And it's also, there's a lot more that's asked of quarterbacks generally once they get into the NFL, and players in general. There's a lot that gets asked of them at that point. But, the amount of things that quarterbacks have to handle mentally, as far as the play calls, that kind of thing, there's so much that, yes, for a veteran quarterback that has all that down pat, they've got the speed of the game, they're used to all that. For a veteran quarterback, they don't necessarily need that help as much, but of course, even then, an offensive line overall is still very important. But for a young quarterback, who maybe just struggling enough just to remember play calls and understand that kind of stuff, it can be helpful for younger quarterbacks to have a center who can be sort of the general in command on the field for the rest of the offensive line to take some stuff off the quarterback's plate that they would otherwise have to deal with. So losing Drew Dahlman, to him retiring this offseason, that's a huge hole that the Bears now have. So that is just right there off the bat. That's a tough one. And the Bears haven't yet really done. Now the Bears did bring in Garrett Bradbury at center, so that's likely going to be the response there. They did bring him in in free agency. Not a huge money deal, not a huge long-term contract, so I don't necessarily expect him to be a Drew Dalman replacement. But to be fair, with all of the Bears' free agency moves and where they're at roster-wise and cap-wise, is the Bears didn't come into this offseason with the most cap space. So part of that, they did lose some other players that I know a lot of Bears fans, including myself, a little bit disappointed that we had to see him go. And that includes on defense, Kevin Byard and Nashawn Wright, two guys that contributed to the Bears defense being top of the league in takeaways and interceptions. I mean, Kevin Byard alone had 7 interceptions. So the Bears lose him. He ended up signing with the Bills. Of course, the Bears traded DJ Moore to the Bills. Lost Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker, lost a few other players, but also added some as well that, some underrated ones. Kobe Bryant was a good one. There's certainly some free agents in the list for the Bears that I'm very interested to see how they do. But the thing is I think for the most part, for the Bears, I'm really just interested to see what they do with the draft. Because again, they did end up signing a center. So that'll likely be their response there. At first when it was announced that Drew Dalman was planning to retire, I thought, oh, well, maybe the Bears are going to pivot in the draft. Maybe they go for center with the first overall pick now, because this is supposed to be, as far as I understand, a pretty good draft for centers, some offensive line positions, and then as well for defensive line. Pretty good draft there. So, which with Drew Dalman retiring and with the other Bears needs, those fit the Bears needs. So this should be a good draft for the Bears. But again, they do bring in Garrett Bradbury at center. So I'm guessing that is going to possibly be, a little bit of a filling in of the gap there. Who knows? Maybe they still draft a center at some point in the draft. I certainly wouldn't expect that'll be the first round now. My assumption now for the Bears' early draft goes back to what it was before, which was I do very much expect the Bears to focus very heavily, at least in the first few rounds of the draft, on defense, and mainly on defensive line, defensive edge. The Bears did bring in a couple defensive tackles in free agency. They brought in Neville Gallimore and then Contavious Street. So a couple defensive tackles they brought in there. Again, brought in a couple secondary players, brought in Khalif Raymond at wide receiver to help fill in the gap for losing DJ Moore and Olamide Zaccheaus at wide receiver. So I wouldn't say that like there's a, big signing for the Bears. But I'm not going to over panic about that. Sometimes I think with free agency, it can be a little bit of fool's gold for fans. Sometimes with these players, no discredit or disrespect to any NFL player that gets to free agency, but for free agency, the rule of free agency is that if a player gets to there and you're wanting them, especially if you're signing them early in free agency, you're likely overpaying for whatever it is you're going to end up getting. If a player got to free agency, chances are whatever their asking price, whatever their and their agent's asking price is for their talents, if their previous team wasn't willing to sign them or able to, it's possible that even if maybe your team has more cap space and more need there, so you're able to make it work, chances are you're overpaying for what you're going to get in return. So a lot of times with free agency, we get these big signings, we get these big trades, and a lot of times the teams that, a lot of times when looking back on the big splash free agency moves, a lot of times they don't end up panning out as much as fans would think. So, it's easy to look at free agent moves that are smaller or names that maybe don't, make headlines as much and go, that's boring. But oftentimes, a lot of times, those are the free agent moves that end up being huge and, end up surprising you once football actually starts. And you go, oh, who was this guy? Oh, we added him in free agency? I totally forgot. So again, for the Bears, didn't have a ton of cap space to work with necessarily. So that's part of it. But I don't necessarily think the moves that the Bears have made were bad at all. And honestly, for Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson as well, of course, but Ryan Poles is the Bears general manager. I trust in him. Obviously, I very much trust in Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams on offense and for the team on the field. But Ryan Poles, I think, gets maybe not enough credit as the Bears general manager. I mean, there's a reason he's stayed as the Bears general manager as long as he has so far. I think he's earned that, and I do think he deserves a little bit more trust and faith from the fan base and from NFL fans in general on what he's doing. We've got other GMs in the league that that are very much respected, that have made a name for themselves, obviously through getting their teams to Super Bowls and that kind of stuff. Now, sure, Ryan Poles hasn't done that yet. And I'm not saying Ryan Poles is perfect. He's had some bad drafts, especially the first couple drafts. There were some picks that were pretty bad. Especially at wide receiver, there were some misses there. But, the biggest one, of course, for Ryan Poles, if you want to argue for Ryan Poles as a good GM, is just look at the Bryce Young trade. Not that the Panthers lost that trade necessarily, but all those draft picks that the Bears ended up getting, plus the trade for DJ Moore, yes, the Bears have now traded him away and got another draft pick. So really the Panthers-Bears trade, that one comes up quite often this last few years. But it ended up giving the Bears the first round pick the next year, which they used on Caleb Williams. It gave them a couple other, 2 or 3 other picks that they've since used that have gone to Luther Burden, who's come onto the scene and been a really good wide receiver for the Bears. Part of the reason they were able to go ahead and trade DJ Moore is because they feel like they've got a wealth of riches at wide receiver now. They were able to get a couple other key players, some on defense. I'm forgetting which players are all exactly on that specific draft outside of Luther Burden and Caleb Williams. So I don't want to say the wrong names on which ones, but if you look at that draft and the exact names that the Bears have gotten just for trading away to a pick that became Bryce Young, I would say that Ryan Poles deserves a ton of credit for getting all that back for that pick. And then they've also made some other pretty good picks. They've brought in some pretty good players in here. Again, this Bears team, 2025 was one of the best seasons that the Bears have had in my lifetime, 27 years. So, a lot of that credit this year goes to Ben Johnson and stuff, but Ryan Poles has been the one, that put together a lot of that roster even before Ben Johnson got there. So, the Bears have a lot of work to do, mainly on defense. It was bottom of the league in almost every category. Not bottom of the league, but like bottom 5, bottom 10 in most categories outside of takeaways. They were first in takeaways and interceptions in 2025, but almost every other defensive category, the Bears were near the bottom of the barrel. So that is the obvious need for the Bears. And again, it's mainly needs that they have at defensive edge, and then maybe some extra help in the secondary. Again, some of that they addressed through free agency, but for the most part, I would like to see the Bears, and I do expect them to put a lot of investment in the 2026 draft here, just about a month into the defense. So, if the Bears defense can just be average at most categories and the offense can be as good as it was in 2025, especially late in games, the Bears are going to still be good. Are they going to be as good or better? I don't know, but I do expect that they'll be in competition for the playoffs, which is saying something in an NFC North that is pretty competitive and has been in the last few years. Let's now move on to the next topic, that being NFL schedule news. So it was announced today, again, March 25th, as the time I'm recording this. It was announced today the exact kickoff date for the 2025 season. So the 2026 season will be kicking off September 9th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be kicking off with the Seattle Seahawks hosting the first game. And the key thing about that date that you might not pick up on unless you're looking at a calendar is September 9th is a Wednesday. So for the first time since 2012, the NFL regular season is going to start on a Wednesday rather than a Thursday. And of course, Wednesdays in general, not a very common game for football games or NFL games. The NFL has done Wednesday games on occasion. They did, I believe, Wednesday was Christmas this year. They did a couple Wednesday games, I think, during the COVID season, if I remember right. So Wednesday games have happened, but pretty rare. And for the very first week of the NFL season, last time that happened was in 2012. And now the reason that Seahawks game will be on Wednesday is because on Thursday is the first ever NFL game in Melbourne, Australia. And that game will be the Rams hosting the 49ers. So Rams and 49ers will be playing in Australia on Thursday, and that I think the time, if I remember right, lines up to about 6 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. It'll still be the primetime Thursday game for those of us here in the States on Thursday night, but the NFL kickoff game to start off the season will be in Seattle on a Wednesday. Now, the exact opponent for the Seahawks hasn't been announced yet for that game. All you got to do if you want to know who the possible opponents are is look up the Seahawks schedule, and look at the teams they're going to be hosting. But you can already, you can pretty easily cross off a few of the possibilities. So there's really only a couple of teams that it could be for that first game of the season. The Seahawks this year are going to be hosting, obviously, the Cardinals, Rams, and 49ers. And then the Cowboys, Giants, Bears, Chiefs, Chargers, and Patriots. So, obviously, it's possible that they do Seahawks-Patriots and just do Super Bowl rematch right out of the gate. I don't anticipate that they'll do that one. They have done that before. But it's seemed like, at least in recent years, they've gone with saving the, if there's a Super Bowl rematch the next year, they've generally done that matchup later in the season. Like they did Eagles, Chiefs, like they saved that this year for, it was like November or something like that. They saved it for that one. Usually they'll try to do like a rivalry game if they think that's going to be good, or they'll just do another team that's, maybe a big market or that they think will drive viewership. So, because they want this kickoff game to bring big numbers, and being that it's on a Thursday, or in this year's case, a Wednesday, they want it to be a big matchup, but they also don't necessarily want to use the Super Bowl rematch game up at the beginning of the season quite yet. So it's possible they do the Patriots. The Chargers, that's possible, but I don't really see that one happening. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers have a home game to start week 1, being that the Rams will be out in Australia, so there won't be any scheduling conflicts there. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers end up getting a home game in week 1. Obviously, the Rams and 49ers are out of the question because they'll be in Australia. You could do the Cardinals, but the ceiling for the Cardinals is not expected to be very high. They should be most likely a bottom feeder this year, so I don't anticipate them putting the Cardinals, who are also a small market team, in there. It is a rivalry game, so use that later. I don't anticipate them using that as the kickoff game. Which that leaves the Giants. I also don't anticipate that one. If they did, it would just be, hey, the Giants have John Harbaugh. They've got, Jackson Dart back. They've got Cam Scadaboo healthy, that kind of thing. But at least unless there's something I'm missing, there's not really any connective tissue or storylines between the Seahawks and the Giants in recent memory that I can think of that they would want to put that there in the NFL kickoff game. So I'm going to cross that off. So really, to me, the NFL kickoff game likely comes down to either the Seahawks hosting the Cowboys, which Cowboys would make sense anytime. Again, the Cowboys are just one of the teams that, if the NFL wants a big number, put up the Cowboys. They'll get a good viewership number. So you could put up the Cowboys, and then the other two options, the Chiefs, I could certainly see that as the option. One reason I could see the NFL maybe avoiding that one is if there's uncertainty about whether or not Patrick Mahomes is going to be ready to start week 1, which, of course, at least as of right now, that's certainly unknowable if he's going to be ready. And by the time the NFL full schedule is released in early May, I don't anticipate that that's necessarily going to change. So I would expect that they'll probably save that Chiefs game for later as well. Again, they still could put the Chiefs there, but being that the Chiefs struggled in 2025, and again, Patrick Mahomes might not be healthy to start the season right away, I would expect that they maybe don't put Seahawks Chiefs in week 1. Honestly, if I had to pick, most likely is either the Cowboys or the Chicago Bears, which that one could make sense just for the fact that you've got, two young coaches, young head coach in Mike McDonald, who just won the Super Bowl with this team, young head coach in Ben Johnson, sort of the newest, one of the newest young offensive gurus that fascinates most viewers. Again, all that the Bears and Caleb Williams did under Ben Johnson, especially on offense. So I could certainly see them putting Seahawks Bears for week 1 as well. But Seahawks Cowboys, I wouldn't be surprised by that one at all either for week 1. So that's the NFL schedule news for now. Again, we'll find out who the Seahawks opponent is and the rest of the schedule. That will be early May, generally a week or two after the NFL draft is over. So the next topic I wanted to go over really quick, that's another way that 2026 might be similar to 2012, 2012, I mentioned, was the last time that an NFL season started on a Wednesday. I have another similarity that may end up happening in 2026 that's not a good thing. And that is with NFL officiating and with the referees. So if you don't remember, in 2012, there was a the NFL and the NFL Referee Association were not able to come to an agreement, similar to the Players Association. They every certain amount of years they have a collective bargaining agreement that has to be agreed on, that kind of thing. And so what happened in 2012 was those negotiations didn't go well. And so, like usual with the NFL, the problem is, doesn't matter if it's referees, the Players Association, the media, the NFL, it's a good problem to have if you're the NFL. I mean, not a problem for them at all, but a good problem for those of us that like the NFL and like the NFL being good, and that want to see that continue, is that the NFL is so big and successful that it's almost bad for its own good, because the NFL is just able to have so much leverage on any negotiating table that they go to. Again, whether that's with the Referees Association, the players, or with the media, they can just be, the NFL can come to the table and say, hey, this is what we want. Take it or leave it. And if you want to leave it, okay, fine. We'll find replacements. We'll, if it really came down to it, like with player lockouts in the past, the NFL has shown, especially now with how much money they make now and how rich these owners are, the owners have no problem with threatening to shut down the league for a year, because they, the league would lose a lot of money, but they can survive that, save the costs on playing games and just, wait, especially with the players. The reason that a player shutout is not going to happen in that same sense is that the players have only a short amount of time to, that they're at this physical state where they're able to play in the NFL and make their money. So the problem is for the NFLPA, for the players, you're just never going to see a full lockout where all the players just choose to boycott unless their side is heard. You're just never going to see that happen, because even if a bunch of starting players were to decide that they want to stand up for, higher pay or whatever, you're going to have other players that are going to be willing to step in and, accept replacement checks to come and play. And so, for the players, that's never going to happen. And for the referees, what we did see in 2012 was they, for the Referees Association, they were a little bit more willing to fight with the NFL and stick it to them, and not accept what, the deal that the NFL was demanding they take for a time. Because in 2012, the first 3 weeks of the season, we ended up having replacement referees. And now the other thing is, if you didn't know, the way the NFL does their officiating is a little weird. A lot of pro leagues have full-time officials. Makes sense, right? The NFL does not have full-time officials. All those officials that you see regularly on NFL games, those guys have other full-time jobs. They might be professors, they might be, they might be doctors, they might be dentists, whatever. They've all got some other full-time job. NFL referees are not doing that job full-time, which for a league that makes as much money as it does, it's ridiculous. That even the main officiating is done that way. And it's just because, to the owners, they don't necessarily really care if people complain that officiating is bad, or that a play, even if people say that a game was ruined because an outcome was changed, the NFL owners most of them don't really care. They care about the bottom line and that's it, Yes, some owners do want to win, and some more than others, but and some, like Jerry Jones, will talk like they want to win a lot, and then their actions don't necessarily match up. Sometimes maybe it's just they don't know how to win and make money at the same time. But if there's one thing they do know how to do and they do like to do, it's make money. So, if they can save a couple bucks here and there by not paying full-time refs, that's how they do it. And again, for referees, what leverage do you have? And so I'm just warning you, we may be heading towards another replacement referee situation, at least for part of 2026. Now, what happened in 2012 was we had replacement refs. The season started as normal without the official refs, and that ended up culminating in the Week 3 Monday night game that became known as the Hail Mary game between the Seahawks and the Packers, where there was a Hail Mary that ended up being counted as a touchdown for the Seahawks that should have been an interception for the Packers, but the replacement refs that were on hand that night ended up calling it the wrong way. And so it ended up giving the Seahawks the win, the Packers a loss, and actually in the end of the season, the change in standing there actually ended up, it made an impact in that season. And so after that night in Week 3 of 2012, then the NFL and the officials association did actually come to an agreement. And from then on, from Week 4 on in 2012, it was the normal refs were back at it again. But I'm just telling you, I'm warning you right now, the reports that are coming out from NFL insiders, not looking good for 2026 to start out with referees. The reason I say that is there was just a tweet just a couple hours ago from Albert Breer, another NFL insider, and he said the NFL and NFLRA's, NFL Refs Association, most recent set of negotiations were set to start today in Florida. They didn't even make it to noon. Talks broke off with the league's owners' meetings set for next week in Arizona, which earlier I had said Florida. It's in Arizona. My apologies. The league meetings are in Arizona this year. But moving on with what Albert Breer says here, from the NFLRA executive director Scott Green, quote, "We gave them a counter proposal and they rejected it. We asked them to give us a response and they refused. As their lead negotiator, Larry Ferranzi, said he was not authorized to do so at that point. They then got up and left." An NFL source said that the NFLRA refused to engage in ways to improve officiating performance. The plan was for the 2 days of negotiating, but talks ended after the morning session. So, again, NFL league annual league meeting is supposed to start next week on Monday. The 2 days for 2 days preceding that, the league meeting is kind of over the weekend and the week, but of next week. But for 2 days preceding that, the NFL's representatives and the NFL Referees Association representatives were supposed to have 2 days of negotiations over a new CBA, and a half a day into negotiations, they completely fell apart and stopped talking. So that is not a good sign. That is a sign that the two sides are way far off from what they are wanting. So, and again, the way that the two sides are presenting this, of course, the Refs Association, obviously, they're probably wanting more pay, whatever. I don't know the exact details of what the Referees Association is asking for currently, but again, I would argue they have valid reasons to argue for some stuff. I know one thing is that the Referees Association likes to argue for that I don't necessarily agree with is complete privacy, like complete. Basically, the Referees Association wants officiating crews to be totally void of having to answer any questions about calls that happen. Not that they really do anyways, but occasionally when there's super bad plays, you might have an officiating person that gives a press release or a statement on something. They're usually nothing burgers, but they sometimes will give stuff like that on specific plays, especially if they happened in like prime time or on a playoff game. But like the Referees Association, I've heard it mentioned that like they want none of that. They don't want there to be any question and answer on what happened here. So there is that. But again, the Referees Association might be wanting better pay. They might want to have refs be able to be full-time. I don't know what the exact demands and hopes are there, but for the NFL's side, they're claiming that what they're trying to do is just change some things around to make officiating better. And we'll get into that in a minute with some of the changes that are going to be discussed in the just overall league meeting this upcoming week. But obviously, the NFL is trying to improve its officiating, but to some extent, with this negotiation and with this statement from the NFL's side of things, I think they're more so just using this as a bargaining chip and as a PR standpoint to try to get fans on their side. Because again, the NFL has the power; they've got the leverage, but if we're being real here, do we really think that these 32 ownership groups and CEOs, I guess the Packers aren't quite the same in that sense, different ownership situation there with fans and local people being owners, but still, do you really think the money makers for these NFL teams, do you really think they are really just wanting to make the officiating better? No, they want to, they want money. They want the financial side of this officiating deal to benefit them. That's what they care about. And it doesn't, based off the reporting, including what I just read, doesn't sound like the two sides are at all close on a deal right now. And with that, there's also been reporting in the last week or so that the NFL has already been putting out feelers to putting out emails and stuff to, officials who are in like junior college level officiating. Like I'm talking like below CFB. We're talking about. We're talking like Division 2, 3, 4, lower than that. Those are the spots that they go for replacement officials. You might think that in 2012 and now you would think that the NFL would go for top level, big power, conference officials. But no, they don't want to do that because the NFL doesn't do that because those are where the actual officials often end up coming up through the ranks through. And so a lot of times those officials aren't going to want to take the offer, because if you're an SEC official and you accept an offer from the NFL to come and be one of the replacement referees, and then you later want to join the NFL Referee Association and be an actual employee, you don't want that association and the already veteran officials to be upset that you were the one that came in and took their job and helped lower their leverage to be able to argue for better pay and whatever. So again, that's why the NFL often goes all the way down to, junior college level, like very small level officiating for the replacement refs. So, if you didn't watch the 2012 or the 2012 early season to know what the replacement officiating was like, if you think officiating is bad normally in football or sports in general, if you think it's bad now, just wait until you see replacement officiating. It will be worse. It was worse in 2012. It was much worse. So I really hope it doesn't happen, but the NFL is already sending out emails trying to get interest from people to be replacement refs, which means if they're already right now at the end of March preparing that kind of stuff, that means they believe, that the NFL itself believes there's a real chance that they're going to need replacement refs at least to begin the season. So, it'll be interesting. Lastly, let's go over some of the. This will just be the top 3 rule changes and topics that are going to be discussed at the NFL league meeting that have been announced anyways. So first of all, they're going to be discussing a rule change to permit the kicking team to declare an onside kick at any point during the game. There's some other kicking rules that they're going to be discussing. Part of it, of course, is just that in the last few years, since the NFL did away with the traditional kickoff, they've changed some of the other rules as far as where you get the ball if it's kicked out of bounds, where you get the ball if it's kicked out of the back of the end zone, where you get the ball if it's not, if it doesn't go within the landing zone that they have now. It's kind of confusing sometimes what all the different yard markers are supposed to be, but regardless, part of the modern kicking rules in the NFL is, and at least in 2025, and since they introduced the new kickoff rule, was at first it was for onside kicks. They now made it so that you had to declare when you were going to make an onside kick, and you were only limited to doing it if you were behind and it was, late in the game. Like, it was very limited, including in 2025. Teams were very limited as to when they could do an onside kick. Now, this proposed rule change, you would still have to declare an onside kick, so it still wouldn't be a surprise like it used to be able to be, but you can now. The proposal, anyways, that's going to be discussed would be to open that up so that teams can do that earlier on in the game, which I think that's fair. Especially being that you're already going to have to still announce it. I think that should be allowed any time in the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if that passed. I don't see that many people objecting to that one. The second one that's going to be discussed is rule to allow NFL league personnel to consult with on-field officials when considering disqualification for both flagrant football acts or non-football acts without being called on the field. So I think part of what triggered this has to do with the altercation that happened during it was before the Steelers-Lions game in Detroit. There was the incident of DK Metcalf punching a fan. I don't remember all the ins and outs of what ended up getting decided of who was right or wrong and all that, but regardless, there was a Lions fan that was shouting who knows what at DK Metcalf before the game. He let it get to him, went up, had a thing. That fan ended up suing the league, the Lions. I think he still, sued the Steelers, sued DK Metcalf, all that kind of stuff. And so part of that is this rule would just be, opening up the ability for the league to disqualify a player for something that they did, even if it was off the field, without throwing a flag during the game. Similar to how they're expanding replay officials' ability to call for replays or change calls, that kind of thing. Similar to how the NFL has been expanding that. They've also had, like, with concussions, having the third party, the neutral third party person that's responsible for radioing down and saying, hey, this player took a hit, take him out, we need to take a look at him. Similar to that kind of stuff, this proposal would just be expanding a little bit more for somebody from New York in the league office to be able to radio in to call into the officials in the stadium and say, hey, we need to take care of this, we need to do that. So that's another proposed one. I'd expect that one to go through. The third rule change that I want to bring up that is going to be discussed this upcoming week, this one was proposed by the Cleveland Browns, and I think it's actually a pretty interesting one. They want to change the rule to allow draft pick selection to be traded up to 5 years in the future. So if you didn't know, currently, again, as I've talked about trades so far in this video, the current NFL rules limit teams to trading picks within the upcoming 3 years. So right now, teams could trade 2026, 2027, and 2028 draft picks. You can't trade draft picks from any further out than that. But the idea behind this proposed change would just open it up to now you can trade draft picks farther in advance. If you really wanted to, that just opens it up for teams to, if teams want to go all in right now, have sort of the F them picks mentality that teams like the Rams have a lot of the times, where they trade away their first round pick all the time. Teams could more so do that even more with this rule now, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It also obviously would allow the opposite. If a team, if a franchise really wanted to, invest in the future and say, hey, we're really bad right now, we'll take 1 or 2 years of being bad and we'll just trade everything we got to draft picks for 3 years, 4 years from now, the teams will be able to do a little bit more of that. Obviously, the two examples I just gave, more of the extreme sides of that. But yeah, you could certainly see, especially on the other end of trying to win right now, this is one of the things that I think could be maybe a downside, especially for coaches and general managers and stuff who, can get fired within a year or two if things don't work out for them, is you could certainly see a desperate GM and head coach that know that they're, they need to win now or they're going to be fired. You could totally see a general manager, trying to, I might not be here 4 or 5 years from now. All right, I'll trade away all those picks and let's go get this guy. Now, obviously, every GM is going to fill the same thing there. So, trading a draft pick for this year, versus, trading a first rounder for 2026 right now versus a first rounder for 2027. Obviously, the 26 first round pick has more value right now in a trade. So, trading a first rounder for 5 years from now, it's going to have less value than trading a first round pick that's this year or next year. But I do think this proposition is interesting. Again, I think on some extreme ends, it could open up to some issues. But honestly, I don't think that those issues would really come to be. This rule change would just open things up for trades more, which I think would be cool. Trades are fun. Again, sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes they work for one side, and a lot of times trades work for both sides. Both teams end up coming out better for that trade. So I think that would be interesting, and regardless of whether or not they work out, especially big trades, blockbuster trades, they're always pretty entertaining. give us stuff to talk about, especially in the off season, but even early into the regular season before the trade deadline. Big trades obviously make big headlines and can be a lot of fun. So I'm down with this rule change. So we'll have to see. Those are the biggest things I wanted to talk about. If you've made it this far into the video, we're about an hour and a half in. If you haven't already, hit the like button. You're a real one. If you make it to the end here, comment banana in the comments. I want to see banana down in the comments. Could be the word, an emoji, whatever you want. Comment banana down in the comments if you made it this far into the video. I do appreciate you if you did. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.